for today's workshop, hopefully. So to understand or better understand our role in creating fun and engaging environment that ultimately leads to a lifelong enjoyment of the game. So when we're coaching our players, it's not just about an hour. It's you know, can we light that fire under them? Can we have that curiosity instilled in them that wants to keep them in the game, no matter what level, but just for their sheer enjoyment at this certainly at this age group, and we'll expand on that a little bit later as well. So consider what sort of template of games we might have, what sort of training might we do that's going to help the players learn, how we're going to help them make more effective decisions as they get used to playing football and as they discover football. So I think that sometimes we try and make our game a little bit too adult for young players, and it's more about making it a great experience. And sometimes, I know certainly when I was a novice coach, I thought I was doing some stuff that was good for the players, but it more likely wasn't. And I've only learned that by experience. So children will enjoy certain things and they won't enjoy other things. And I'm sure that people who have been coaching a while will know that, and it becomes abundantly clear. So recognising the benefits of using a constraints-based approach to help players in making their decisions. So having maybe some rewards, some restrictions in the practices to get the outcomes that we want, but also more importantly the players want and need, to help them with their sort of technical development and the learning of the game. So they're the things we're hoping will come out of it. You can let us know at the end of this workshop what you've got out of it and whether we've got that out of it as well. So whether we've realised those outcomes, and hopefully we will, and we'll get far more from it as well. Okay, so just three things there. The power of play, and I think this is really, really important. And when I was putting this slide deck together, I was thinking to myself, what did I used to enjoy about playing? And as everybody can see on the call, I'm quite experienced is a good word, I suppose I'd use now, rather than old. So I certainly remember the way that I learned the game, at any game, was to go out and play. And I think sometimes we've become a little bit detached from that, and we don't recreate those sort of circumstances for our players sometimes. And maybe we don't realise the benefit of creating that playfulness within our environment. Sometimes, and again, I've done it, everybody's done it, we make our training very much specific to the game, things we want to get out of the game maybe rather than what the players want to get out of the game. And I think it's really important that we have aspects of play. Plays where children can use their initiative, they can use their innovation, they can make stuff up, they can come up with ideas, they can work their own problems out. And also thinking about that aspect as well. I remember that a majority of my time was spent on a green outside our house. So we had like a crescent with a green with trees, and a no ball sign, or no balls sign, which we sort of used for accuracy, and the trees were used for goals. And you used to get other kids come round from another street, and that was our opposition. And sometimes they'd have bigger kids, and if they had bigger kids and was winning, beating us quite convincingly, then we'd have one of their bigger kids. So we learned to adapt, to modify what we was doing, made our rules up as we went on. There weren't any coaches in sight, and that was really refreshing, that nobody was there telling us what to do. So I think sometimes it's it's about us relinquishing some of our powers, if you like, and allowing the players to explore and experiment and find out things for themselves. But that doesn't mean we haven't got a role to play, certainly as coaches, and it's more of a guiding role and a role where we can encourage and maybe ask questions and challenge players in different ways. So the importance of your coaching. So I think that from my point of view, like it says there, I didn't have a coach until I was 14. So youth football didn't really exist other than at school. So there wasn't a youth league until 14. So other than that, it was school's football and playing with your friends, making games up yourself. And it's not a problem that we're all involved in football at younger ages with the players now. But do we still make it enjoyable? Do we still make it fun? Or what detracts from it being enjoyable and being fun? And sometimes it's knowing what the players really need or what they want, more importantly, not what they need, because that's our opinion. So maybe we ask them, what do they think they need to get better at? What do they want to improve? What have they done well? What do they want to get better at? Have they seen somebody else who's done really well that they'd like to be able to do some of the things they do? But most of all, I think we're talking about football as being a vehicle for sport, but it could be any sport. I think it's really important that children are involved in sport in some way, shape or form. And I think that certainly from my point of view, I've always found that team sport is better as well. I think individual sport's really difficult because you haven't got a team, you don't build them friendships, you don't have that camaraderie. You don't have players to help you, and you collaborate and help others. So I think you gain a lot out of team sports, definitely. But I'm not saying there's massive returns in individual sport as well. And it's creating that lifelong passion. And I would imagine that most of you on the call started playing as youngsters. Somebody or something sparked that fire within you for you to now still be involved in sport and still have a passion to now coach rather than play, maybe. I think it's looking at that and analysing, well, why is that? Why are we still involved? Why do we still want to be involved in the game? And an offshoot of that, obviously, is like it says, there's a great basis for a healthy lifestyle. I'm not saying that when we get to be adults, we don't play football and then go and have a drink. But for youngsters, very healthy lifestyle. Great for them to be active. All too many not being active. So the basics of a child and a player's development, hugely important. And anybody that's been on courses, I'd like to think this has been highlighted to you about recognising the different stages that players go through, the development and the different speeds that they learn at. So I certainly used to think, well, it's a one size fits all. So if I do something within my practice, then that's got to be great for everybody. But you soon realise that it's not, and maybe there'll be players within that group, and that could be any group who cope quite well. There might be some who struggle with what you're putting on and you want them to do. You want them to try and achieve and get better at, and there'll be others who are forging ahead and are ready for a new challenge. So they're the things that we have to take into consideration as well. But also, what about the sort of holistic approach? So it's not just about can they do it technically, what do they move like, what's their decision making like, what's their emotions like, are they chatty? If we talk about social corner, are they chatty? Do they make friends? Do they have a big friendship group? Are they insular? So lots and lots of different stuff there. Okay. Any questions yet, Andy or Lawrence, or any comments?
Not at the moment, Gary. No, it's all.
Because I do talk a lot once I get going, as you know, don't I?
I'm sure we'll get some soon.
Okay. So, does anybody know the first line of A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens?
I think we might have a few, but maybe
apart from Andy
quick enough. There we go. Mark Gordon's in.
Yeah, is he in?
Yeah.
Well done, Mark.
Got it.
It's the best of times and the worst of times. If we're working in the foundation phase, it's certainly that. So it's the best of times because our players are like sponges. They crave information. They're always asking questions. They love different and varied experiences. They love problems to solve. If we give them problems to solve, but sometimes we maybe don't give them problems to solve. We just give them answers to remember, and that's generally not the best way of going about things. They're very, very curious. They want to explore and they want to experiment, and it's no different to what I was talking about a little while ago when I was playing outside my house on a green, playing against the team from the next road. I wanted to try things. I wanted to get better at things. I was curious about, well, could I beat this player, or how can I stop that player getting past me? So children don't change. Children are going to be like that, forever. That's the stage of learning they're going through. So how do we cater for those sort of players? So that's the best of times. The worst of times, maybe, a lot of the time they're like space cadets and they're away with the fairies at certain age groups. And it's almost like trying to herd cats, which is quite difficult if anybody's tried it. They tend to not listen, or we don't think they listen. But they may be listening, but not paying full attention. So I know I used to have a bugbear of players bouncing the ball while I was talking, but I soon came to realise that there were some players who can bounce the ball and listen at the same time. So that made me look a bit stupid one day when I sort of quizzed somebody to say, did you hear what I said? And they just reeled it off verbatim. So I didn't really say it anymore. They don't tend to concentrate because they can't concentrate yet. They make loads and loads of mistakes because they're learning about this new game of football. So I think that some players and some children are, if we look at the whole sort of holistic approach, some players, struggle with coordination. So if you then put a ball at their feet, what do they look like then? So I think that if we look at all of those things, it creates a great problem for us to solve ourselves. And how do we go about catering for all of these different players?
Gary, do you mind if I just drop in something on that?
You drop in anything you like, Andy.
So just on that first point, I mean, people feel free to populate some questions as we go through. But I think from a coach's point of view, and everyone here involved in the foundation phase, the youngest children, and some extremely young and impressionable. And so when we talk about being like sponges, our behaviour as a coach is arguably one of the most important things. So if we react negatively towards somebody who perhaps made a mistake, or throw our hands in the air when something happens in a game, the impact of that can be incredibly profound on a young person. So yes, they're like sponges, they're going to take on loads of information, but the information we give or put across, whether that be verbally or just from our behaviour, it's really, really important that's positive, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also, staying on that point, Andy, we need to know why they've made a mistake. So obviously they haven't meant to make a mistake, because nobody does. But just seeing it as a mistake is not enough. It's why has that not happened? How maybe they wanted it to happen and we might have wanted it to happen. And until we have some dialogue with that child, we won't know why that mistake's happened. We'll have an opinion and an assumption of why it's happened, but we need to maybe delve into it deeper and have a conversation about why that might have happened. And in a way that the player doesn't feel bad, the child doesn't feel bad. So it might just be a conversation about, oh, well, you know, what are you trying to do there, Andy? Yeah. So that's a really, really good point. So I tend to look at players in this age group, in any age group really. I try to take them away from the football environment and think about, well, what are those children like out of their kit, in their school uniform or around the house? What can we expect from them in that environment, and what do we expect from them in a football environment? And sometimes there's not a correlation between the two, because if we're talking about, you know, the youngest players in the age groups, if we're saying from 5 to 8 in the foundation phase, they're not going to make great decisions, because when we're at home with them, they don't make great decisions. So why would they make great decisions on the football pitch? But it's our perception of football, and we link it to maybe sometimes the game we see on telly, where they still make mistakes. Look at David Luiz the other day. So that's a professional footballer who's getting thousands of pounds a week, still makes mistakes. Now, how would we react if that was our 8-year-old who made that mistake? We wouldn't expect them to make a mistake. They more likely wouldn't, actually, but there you go. So really important point, and one well raised, Andy, and I think it's something that we need to consider. So why do they make mistakes? And we can delve into that as deep as we like, and that could be an hour's bit of CPD as well, if we want to continue down that route. But something to consider. Okay, anything else on our best of times or worst of times, anybody, before I move it on? Does anybody agree with that? Has anybody got a different view of that? Or has everybody had the similar sort of experience around foundation phase coaching? Okay. So going back to the last slide, and you know, the best of times, the worst of times, massively important that we know that the players and the children that we're working with. I honestly don't think that you can work with a player unless you know the child. So unless we know why they actually play, what motivates them to turn up, is it they love football? Is it they're there because their mate's there and their mate has told them that they enjoy football, you should come and try it? Is it because parents want to take them to get them out of the way sometimes, to give them a little bit of time to go shopping or whatever? What's the reasons they play football? What do they enjoy about playing football? What do they enjoy about the sport? Do they just love sport in general? What's their relationship with sport? Again, have they got other passions? Do they like to play other sports? Do they like to take part in other sports? Do they want to get as good as they can possibly be, or do they just love running about and kicking a ball, or throwing a ball, or hitting a ball? So they're the things we need to know about our players before we can actually have an impact on those players. What actually motivates them to be there? Have people on the call ask their players those questions before? Do you know why your players turn up, your children turn up for you to work with them, or not? If you don't know, do you think you should know? And if you think you should know, how's it going to help you?
Gary,
I won't read off any more questions.
Yeah, we just had an interesting comment come in, observation from Ben Pratt. So I think the floodgates will open now, I think.
So
just said, hi, Gary, I'm coaching under 14s now, but did coach under 6 for a season and found it more difficult to manage the parents, which I'm sure there'll be a few nods on that one, than he did the players. I was constantly asked, when are you teaching this concept or that concept? And his response was that when they've worked out what the pitch is, which is a good point. So his question was about how to manage, potentially pushy parents, which is a whole another world, isn't it? But it's a valid point, and I'm sure
another workshop.
It comes up.
It's a great question, Ben, and I think that it's a question that everybody on this call has had to manage, or a problem. If we perceive it as a problem, that everybody on this call is more likely had to manage. So I think that in answer to that, I was in exactly the same boat as everybody on this call at certain times in my career, where you will have some parents who you just won't appease no matter what you try and do, but also there will be parents, if you involve them in the process and you let parents know why you're doing certain things, what the benefit of you doing this is for their boy or their girl rather than the footballer. So I'm doing this because of this. I've noticed that little Jimmy needs my support in this area of playing football, so I'm focusing on that with him. I've noticed that Beth, I'll take Beth because I see Beth on the call. It's the first name that comes in the head then. Beth needs this. She's really quiet. She doesn't talk a lot. So I'm now doing this with Beth to try and bring her out of herself a little bit. So I think it's really important that we involve the parents in the process, because that's their little baby that you're working with. So whether it's their little soldier or whoever it might be, and we all want the best for our children. We all want to know that they're getting the best from the coach. And so it always amazes me that you'll get certain parents who will drop their kids off at training and then just go away, rather than take an interest in what the coach is doing, what their child's doing. And I know they might want to do some shopping, but they can do that online, can't they, really? So I think it's involving the parents in the process, them feeling part of the process as well. I think that's something. So I know that, again, when I was more inexperienced, I used to march the players away about 50 yards away from the parents, because I didn't want the parents butting in and I didn't want them having an input. But I found it to be far more beneficial to talk to my group of children or players in front of the parents, not so close that the parents can have an input, but the parents can hear what I'm saying. So if they can hear what I'm saying, they know what I'm asking of the players, they know how I'm supporting the players, they know the relationship that I'm trying to build with the players, rather than not knowing what I'm saying, and then maybe they perceive I'm not affecting players within the game. So I think that there might be stuff where we're giving players challenges and asking them questions in prior to games and in the break, half time, or after games in a debrief. If parents don't get to hear that, they might think we're not doing a great deal with the players or the children, because they haven't heard what we've said to the players. So I think one thing that I would certainly do is try and think of how you can involve parents in the process more. Myself as a parent would certainly like that. Without a doubt.
Just so we can keep a track, I'm just doing a bit of a thumbs up on someone. So we take two more, if that's okay, before we move it on.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of others that we can perhaps pick up as we go through. So Gavin and Jeff, we can
it's
pick
nice
up.
For somebody else to be talking.
Yeah. So Robert West just commented saying, good to remind ourselves to set problems to solve, as you've mentioned, rather than questions to guess the right answer. And sometimes, we hear it often where coach will jump in with the answer just to fill the time and to speed things up, which completely defeats the object, the whole thing of setting a question in the first place, or giving them a clue to the answer, or starting the word off. I used to do that all the time. So you'd almost give part of the answer, and really that's not part of the learning process whatsoever. It's just quick fire, isn't it? But he said often I see session plans for younger players that aren't age appropriate, which is a good observation and something that we see a lot as well. But that, I suppose, that's part of the education process, isn't it? He said, what are you saying seems more correct in relation to the very young? I guess that means, what type of session perhaps for the younger ones. I think less is more of a lot of this, and listening, isn't it, to feedback and feeling from the players.
I think that just say that last bit again, Andy.
Just saying about what seems most correct in relation to the very young. I guess that's in relation to session plans.
Yeah. I think that it's good, really good points. I think certainly from I've noticed in recent years that match analysis has become massive, whether it be on telly or whether it be people on Twitter or whatever other social platform you want to talk about. And there's lots of people getting into analysis. And also we're constantly talking about formations. If we're talking about the foundation phase, and especially the younger part of the foundation phase, but also I think it goes into sort of 9 to 12 as well. I look at it from the point of view of going back to playfulness. I think that players should be playing games most of the time, seeing lots of the ball, helping, finding out what works, finding out what doesn't work with our support and guidance. If we're trying to, and again, I've fallen into this trap years ago, and I've tried to be, teaching loads of different techniques and things like that, and thinking I'm doing a really good job, and the players more likely were so bored it was unbelievable, because they've not turned up to do what I'm doing with them. They've turned up to have a great experience and an enjoyable experience and a fulfilling experience, and I more likely didn't give them that in the early days. They want to be playing football, so how can we make our training game related but working on different themes? So again, the constraints based training about it may be running the ball into an end zone, passing the ball into an end zone. I want you to you can't pass the ball until you dribble past the player. Whatever way you want to pitch that constraints within a practice and give players little challenges within a practice, ultimately they're playing football. We don't need to worry about necessarily what players can do and what they can't do in a game of football at the young ages. I'll ask a question to everybody on the call. What do you think the most important? I don't know if I've answered that question fully yet, but I'm going to ask a question. In the foundation phase, what do you think the most important thing is to promote within young players? So that's a question for everybody on the call, and you can fire back at your will. Gary, and then I'll let you know what I personally think.
There's a lot coming in, Gary. Just whilst that's being populated, there was just one more to pick up in this section from Nikki Potts. So thanks for that, Nikki.
Okay, Nick.
Said, Gary, what do you think about players practicing and playing above and below? So year group up, year group down at foundation phase.
Not a problem from my point of view, as long as your league allows it. I think sometimes it's rules get in the way, but I certainly wouldn't have a problem with it, as long as it's not it's not done for the wrong reason, to you know, players playing down to try and win games, as long as it's done for a reason that. So there's some clips of film around the youth development phase with Marcus Rashford, Luke Shaw, and Jesse Lingard. And Jesse Lingard played down on a regular basis when he was 16, when they played certain teams, because he just physically wasn't big enough to cope with the physical demands that the other team was bringing. So Man United played him down in those fixtures, dipped him in every now and again into other fixtures because he physically wasn't strong enough to cope. He had all the other attributes, and they knew if he developed physically and they gave him the time to develop physically, he was going to be the player that he is. Who knows what would have happened if they'd have persisted in just playing him at his proper age group, and he got battered every time they played certain teams. What that would have done for his motivation, his self-esteem, that sort of stuff. So that was managed, from my point of view, that was managed really well. But again, Nick, I don't see a problem, but I suppose the problem lies in whether we can do it or not regarding leagues. In Utopia would say you should be able to do it because it's helping with a player's development as long as it's done for the right reasons.
I think that's the main thing, isn't it? It's all factors considered. It's communication between the child, the parent, coach, and anyone else that's involved. And just it could be that you try it for a period of time just to put them in a bit of a red zone or to challenge them a little bit. But then there's also a lot of research to suggest that being in a comfortable environment in what you might call the green zone is also really beneficial. So balance is key. But as you said, sometimes you might be restricted by a bit of red tape that exists. So I suppose challenge, ask questions, because that's the only way to drive things forward, isn't it?
Yeah, without doubt.
Just linked to your question that you posed about what's most important. So I'll just fire through just the sort of key ones: having fun, sportsmanship, enjoyment, love of the game, enjoyment of the game. There's lots of common themes here: fun, enjoyment. Pretty much all exactly the same. Smiling, fun and confidence, enjoyment, technique, decision making. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. So it's quite a common thread there, isn't there?
Okay. So going back to one of the things I said about constraints or risk and reward. By me saying to a player, as I give an example of, I don't want you to pass until you dribble past somebody. What am I hoping to instill in that player? Would you say? Anybody? And that's the answer I'm looking for. So I want my players to be something before I try and teach them other things.
Couple coming in, confident. 3 of them now, confident.
Good.
Confident on the ball, brave.
Good. Along them lines, yeah. So I think if I was to have my time again, with in the younger age groups in the foundation phase, I wouldn't work on passing. I wouldn't work on it at all. I'd purely work on players being creative. And I think that's the same for as they get older. Obviously you implement the other aspects, but my main focus for foundation phase players will be instilling or trying to promote creativity within my players, because once they come out of the foundation phase, if they haven't had the opportunity to be creative, to be expansive, to explore different ways of beating a player, taking players on, unbalancing a player, being being cunning, being deceptive, then we can't teach them that later. So we can't teach creativity. We can try to, but we can't teach creativity once children get to a certain age, because they learn what they can do and what they can't do, and they will get into a fixed mindset about what they can do and what they can't do, and what they're restricted by. So, if, for instance, and if we've got any graphic designers or artists on the call, you're not included in this. But if I said to everybody, what I want you to do, everybody on the call, I want you to either draw myself, Andy. Don't draw me because there'd be too many lines. Draw myself, Andy, or Lawrence. How would you feel if I asked you to draw us? And most of us would feel a bit embarrassed, a bit silly, because we might be not that good at drawing. And the reason we feel like that is because more likely somebody at some point in their life has gone, "You're not very good at drawing. That's not very good. That's rubbish." So we have to try and instill that creativity within our young players, our young children, at a young age. Because when they get to a certain age, we won't be able to do it. If anybody's got an alternative opinion, great.
There's some really good stuff that's come in that we'll try to just keep an eye on, because I think it will form some good stuff for later on as well. Just thinking of
Excellent.
the time.
Okay, good stuff. Shall we? So, like it says there, I haven't gone through all these slides yet. We've had a good chat. So again, going back to the first 5 points. So when we know about our players, then it gives us a gauge on what we can do. Once we know the stage they're at as well, we can think about the types of maybe games, challenges, questions we might ask that's going to help us to tailor the sessions for them. Going back to, I forget whose point it was now, about doing somebody else's practices and just maybe pulling them off the internet. That's not for our players. Unless we can change it to suit our players and more importantly our players' needs, don't put it off the internet. Think about a game that the players can play, and it hasn't got to be all singing, all dancing. It could be a certain type of setup that we utilise with the players, a certain type of game that has got challenges linked to their needs. That's what our players need. They need us to try and develop games and design games to suit them. There's millions of practices on a search engine, but very few of them will be suitable for us or our group or our environment. So I think it's great if you can get into the habit of coming up with things that are relevant for your players, rather than just take something off the shelf. There is stuff that you can utilise, obviously, that would be applicable, but a lot of it hasn't been designed for your players per se. So, as I've said in bold print there, and it goes back to the creativity. This foundation phase is a critical learning window. And unless we allow the players to do everything that we've spoken about before, they're going to start to run out of opportunities. Because sadly, when they start going into the youth development phase, for some reason we see it as a step into a different world, whereas it's not. We still want similar things for our children in the next phase as well, but gradually it becomes more complex. The game becomes more complex, and the players can cope with it because they're older. They've played for longer. They've gained more knowledge of football. They've gained more game craft. They'll know a lot more than they did when they was starting out playing football. Okay.
Gary, just on that point, I know there's been lots of other stuff that's come out. I don't want to miss too many. but there's been quite a few that come through. But just on that last sort of bit you were talking about there, about using bits from the internet, Rob West said, maybe we're guilty sometimes as coaches looking for the right answer rather than embracing the challenge of solving the problem, which is such a good point, a pertinent point, because sometimes it's easier, but actually in bypassing that whole process or even thinking about it properly, we're doing a disservice to the kids, really, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, there's not a right answer.
No.
So the right answer would depend on a moment in time, and and if somebody's on a website is saying this is how you must do it or this is how you should do it, then that's wrong, because they don't know who we're working with. They don't know why our players are there. They don't know what all of our players are like in the technical corner, the physical corner, the psychological corner, the social corner. And maybe some of us on the call don't know yet what some of our players are like in those corners. I suppose my first bit of advice would be, if we don't know our players in and what they look like in all four corners, then find out. So maybe do a piece of work where we're saying, well, okay, so I've got Charlie. What's Charlie like technically at the moment? What can Charlie do technically at this current time, at this stage in their, short time of playing football? What's he like, without the ball? His movement skills. Is he quick? Is he not quick? Can he turn really well? Is he agile? Has he got good balance and coordination? Or are there elements within that I maybe can help him with? In a psychological corner, are they focused? Do they love a challenge? Do they make better decisions than somebody else, or do they make poorer decisions than somebody else? Why do we think that is? Do we give them enough opportunities to make decisions, or do we just tell them what to do all the time and then expect them to make good decisions? Because they're not going to. So sometimes we might tell our players what to do, hoping to shorten the process, but in the long run, they're the ones that have to make decisions because they're the ones on the pitch. So take a back seat and allow them to make decisions. But with that will come mistakes. And as long as, I think the biggest challenge for us is letting that happen. We need to let that happen. We need to let them make mistakes so they can learn from them, and we can learn. So I'm learning what support that child needs to help them get better and to help them learn. If I just give them the answer all the time, then I'm doing that child a disservice, really. Don't get me wrong. There may come a time where you maybe do tell them what to do, or you do give them advice on how to do it, but that's not our first port of call. That's not our default, or it shouldn't be, but with any player, really.
Just on that, Gary.
Forgot where I was now.
just on that, in terms of understanding your players, and maybe getting to know them beforehand, whenever. There's an interesting point that kind of relates to that, which is from Andrew, who's just mentioned that at the younger ages, it's hard to design games and drills that meet everyone's needs due to the kind of different levels that they can be at.
Yeah.
So I suppose that leads back to what you're saying about maybe knowing your players, just that little bit more, which can then help with designing those practices. There's also a good point from Ben, who just mentions about 3v3 and how that's a good starting point. There's obviously lots of time on the ball, lots of touches on the ball, more opportunities to take on players, opportunities for everything, really. So that's another really good point from Ben. That could be a good starting point in terms of smaller sided games, and you can learn so much from your players through through adaptations of those games.
And also it's helpful because it reduces decision making for our players. They haven't got as many options as well. So it might make it easier for some, it might make it harder for others. Going back to the first point, around differentiation and giving. I think the thing with it, if we've got players of different levels, and we all have, and same as us on this call, we've got different gaps in our knowledge and strengths. I think that the one way of thinking about doing it is, so we're putting on a practice, but the focus for everybody doesn't need to be the same. So a way of differentiating it is to give people different challenges within that practice. Now that's more work, but if we're going to coach and try and benefit the players, but also it's going to make us a better coach, and it links to that 4 corners that I was talking about just now. If I know the gaps and the areas of development for the players, I can shape the challenges that I employ in my practices relevant to individuals.
I think on that one, Gary, is the way that would look on the outside, just I suppose to bring that to life a little bit. If you're setting individual challenges to the outside viewer, us looking in, parents looking in, that would be quite subtle, but we would probably argue effective. Whereas the more command type style, which is meant for everybody, perhaps is a lot more explicit and perhaps looks more to the untrained eye like coaching.
Like you're doing your job.
Yeah, like you're doing your job. And then there is that pressure, and I think everyone would have felt it at some stage. New to coaching, I need to make an impression in some way, and that might need to be through the use of my voice, or it might be through the use of hand gestures. You might just be a naturally passionate person anyway, but that approach of taking your time and giving individual input and supporting or asking questions and having that one-to-one drive-by time with individual children can have such a huge impact on their development. And when you see it happening, or if you've never tried it before and you do try it, the feedback we get constantly, isn't it? If that's introduced to somebody on a level 1 or level 2, the feedback they get is it really works, and it's proven. So I suppose the message is don't always feel like you need to put on a show. Actually, just take a step back, like you've mentioned already, and take your time and find out more. Do your research, and your research could just be watching a person for 5 minutes, which actually is quite hard to do, to keep that focus if they're playing a game.
I mean, I suppose first and foremost, we need to observe, so we know how to best support an individual, and also it goes back to what we spoke about earlier about involving parents in the process, and the giving players challenges being more subtle is not as obvious. So therefore, we might tell the parents what we're doing, or we might say if it's a youngster that we've given a challenge to, we might go to that parent and go, can you do me a favour? Can you keep an eye on Charlie? So it could be a parent who's maybe a bit busy sometimes. So we might say to that parent, can you keep an eye on Charlie? Because I've given him a little challenge. Can you do me a favour and tell me how many times he's successful with it? So that's giving the parents something to do as well. And maybe they'll concentrate on that a bit rather than being too lively like they normally are. So we've engaged that, but they know that we're actually giving players challenges. And hopefully that creates a better environment all round. Might not, but it's a mechanism. And I think that I suppose the most difficult thing for us as coaches is that's harder than telling people what to do. Mm-hmm. Telling players what to do or children what to do is the easy bit. That doesn't take a great deal of work. To actually apply the process that we've just spoken about is far more difficult, and it takes more planning, and it takes more reflection, and also we have to be able to observe what's going on to know maybe what the needs are in the first place. But once we've given the challenge, maybe how successful were they and what's their needs now going forward. So that's more difficult, however far more beneficial for in the long run, and we're talking about the long run because this is our launch pad in the foundation phase, I think. And if we get things right in the foundation phase, I honestly think that our players have got a better chance of reaching their potential, whatever that potential is, as they get older, with our support and our guidance.
I think that's really key, Gary, and what you said about the, it is kind of a launch pad, and we are looking at the long run or the long term, and that relates back again, when we're talking about parent involvement and how much we communicate to parents and how much we kind of involve them in their child's learning, because, naturally, parents are going to be looking at it from a different lens to you will be as a coach, and the parents will be looking at it from what they relate to, and if they relate to watching the professional game, or they relate to, watching Premier League football, that might be, how they're viewing all football or all sports.
Yeah.
So if they're looking at your sessions and expecting to see you marching up and down the touchline and giving them instruction and setting formations and telling them what to do, that might mean that at the very beginning of your, I suppose, journey with these players would be a good opportunity to, set these expectations and involve the parents as much as possible and let them know, what it is you're aiming for. Let them know that it is a long-term plan, and what we're trying to maybe gain at the end of it.
That's a really good point, Lawrence.
Some of the perceptions also on that, Lawrence, could have been based on other coaches that they've seen. So if a parents have seen other coaches and practicing or behaving however they might do, it might that is just how it's supposed to be. So I think if you're sharing your intentions there, but within that you also share, this is how I'm going to be. So it's like, I'm going to do this for you. This is how I'm going to try to go about it. And then you're opening up, and it shows an element of vulnerability, I think, which I think is really important for that connection between you and them.
No, that's good. Okay, and any other comments coming at all, Andy, that you want to highlight?
There's a few still, but I think we can come back to some of these more towards the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, mate. Cool. Okay, so I suppose some of the stuff we've spoken about has sort of taken care of the top part of that, slide. So we hear that on a regular basis, don't we, in kids football? Telling people to just kick it out, get rid of it, play the way you're facing, play the easy ball. So that just eradicates all decision making, really. And we've already said that we want to try and promote decision making. We want to make it a positive experience. Players don't necessarily need to be told what to do, and B, they don't need telling that they've made a mistake once they've made a mistake, because they might know they haven't been able to do what they tried to do. So it doesn't really need highlighting from the side of the pitch, whether that be vocally or emphasised through body language. So we've had a fair bit of discussion around those sorts of things anyway, I think. Okay, so we had 2 clips of film that we was going to show, and like I said at the outset, you will get. I didn't actually take that off, Andy. You will get these clips of film. So just as a little task for the next 2 minutes. No, we do a minute because 2 minutes seems a long time. So just for the next minute, could you put down what your understanding is of hiding the ball, manoeuvring the ball, and revealing the ball? Okay, so if we was working with our players, what sorts of things might we think about to try and teach our players around those three aspects? Maybe you could give an example of somebody who does all 3 of them well, or does one of those 3 well. Got any prizes, Andy, for this?
Let's work on that one. I think so. Just going back to what you were saying there, Gary, about the links, we'll try and post those below the video once it's uploaded onto YouTube.
Yeah, it's a shame.
People can access. So we've already had one come in from Katil. So hide the ball, putting yourself between opposition and ball. Nice, very very concise.
Yeah, physical barrier stuff.
And Nikki has said, hide the ball, somebody dribbling and using the foot furthest away from the defender.
Yeah.
So some might say safe side. You hear that quite a lot.
Yeah, good.
A few coming in now.
Good one from Jeff there about shielding. So, another word for hiding really. So shielding, dragging and pushing away.
Good.
Protecting the ball as well. So similar points. Read any on manoeuvre?
Thanks for that, Angela.
Angela's given us some definitions.
Yeah, Angela's got hide. So shielding the ball to keep it away from the defender.
Yeah, she's mentioned manoeuvre there as well. So Angela's mentioned manoeuvre, so moving the ball away from the defender, and reveal, moving the ball, moving with the ball to beat a defender.
Good. Yeah, excellent.
Oh, sorry, Angela's actually Chris. Angela's actually Chris. Different account. Apologies for that. Thanks for that, Chris. So John's put twisting and turning. So like some of these that are coming in really good in terms of the language that you might use with some of the younger ones as well.
No, that's great. So I don't know if we've got on one of the final slides. There's some links to foundation phase boot room information, and there's some great information on there around practices we might do for hiding the ball, manoeuvring the ball, revealing the ball at certain age groups, and I think a lot of players find it difficult because they're being continuously told to pass it and get rid of it. So and I think the reason why is because there's an element of risk if we try and hide the ball, and manoeuvre the ball, and reveal the ball. So again, it's allowing our players to be more creative at the young ages, and helping them or giving them the opportunity to try and learn how to do all three of those, as well as doing the other stuff that they're trying to do. So, how successful can they be? How long can they do it for? Are they able to actually do that? Maybe off both sides of their body. Can they hide the ball, and make that physical barrier whilst protecting the ball with their right foot predominantly, or protecting the ball with their left foot? Or can they only do it on one side of their body? So that gives us an idea of maybe the area for development that they need, because if they can't get used to doing it off both sides of the body, then they're going to be very predictable as they get older. The manoeuvring the ball, how do they manoeuvre the ball? Again, can they just manoeuvre the ball in a certain way? Have they got a favourite way of doing it? Is it very predictive? Will an intelligent defender later on be able to work that out quite easily? Or do we give them challenges that maybe helps them to learn different ways of manoeuvring the ball? Maybe, it might be that they manoeuvre the ball with the sole of their foot. It might be they manoeuvre the ball with the outside of the foot, inside of the foot. And again, by experimenting, they'll find different ways of manoeuvring the ball and hiding the ball. And revealing the ball as well. So, we reveal the ball when we're running at people. And if we're not careful, we let the ball go too far out of our feet and we lose the ball. So players need opportunities to get better at that and achieve doing that. It could be that as players get older, they reveal the ball to try and draw players in, to suck players in, to create space for their teammates, because now as they're getting older, they've got a greater appreciation of their teammates. So they might reveal the ball to draw people in to then play the ball. Or they might reveal the ball to unbalance a player to take it past them. So there's lots of things involved in it. So there's some great There's some great stuff put in the chat as well. So thanks for doing that. And that's that's another thing that the sort of 1v1s, 2v2, 3v3s are good for. Or could that be some constraints we add to our practices to get our players to do more of that as well? So think of ways that you can utilise those three aspects within your practices to try and promote the players to be more successful at doing that. Any other thoughts, guys?
Just thinking of bringing that to life a little bit, an example.
You're going to give a demo?
Yeah, let me just draw it out for you. So perhaps, in a little small-sided game, some thirds or something. So you could actually just flip it on its head to perhaps how you might normally perceive it, and say that if you're in your own defensive third, you've got to get out yourself.
Yeah.
So you've got to work out how to get out of there, because the more times you put people into those situations in areas that might traditionally be perceived as dangerous or we can't do it there, watch professional football now. These players have been brought up on the diet of work out, and yes, you can do it there. I trust you to.
Yeah. So
that might take some time, and it might be a hard concept for some people to actually deal with. But doing it at the earliest age groups, that the hard work is done as they move through the game.
Yeah. I think that the barrier to this is it might cost us a goal if we're all perfectly honest.
Yeah.
And by that token, we might not get the result we want. So it goes back to what's important to us. Is it we want to develop our players, or we want to win football matches? Certainly in the foundation phase, most important thing from my point of view is developing, because without those players developing and getting better, they're not going to win games later on. And I think a majority of academies as well will have that ethos. Yes, you get some egos get in the way, but I think predominantly the people that run the academies and oversee them, their thing is development of players. Yes, when it gets to 23s first team, massively important, but the 23s are still developing, so they're still gonna have areas that they need to improve. When it gets to first team, they've got to win. Simple as that. But everything leading up to that is a form of developmental football.
It comes back to what you said. Oh, sorry, Andy. It comes back to what you said, Gary, about the long term and also why do the players play? And I imagine the majority will say because they enjoy playing. They enjoy the sport. They want to play. They want to be with their friends. Some will no doubt say because they like to win, but it's certainly not going to be the main reason or the majority reason.
And that's not a problem, Lawrence, is it? If the players are saying I want to win, it's not a problem. It's maybe when we, especially in the foundation phase, if we're driving that as coaches, that's where it becomes a problem. If the players want to win as much as possible, and they will, because they're human beings, and if you've got 2 kids at home, they'll want to win eating their dinner. They're competitive. We're competitive animals, humans, aren't we? So the players will want to win football matches, but that's that shouldn't supersede them wanting to get better as well, and wanting to improve and striving to improve.
I think that's it, isn't it? And that winning doesn't define those players. It doesn't define us as coaches. So
in an ideal world, we'd want to win every game, wouldn't we?
That's it.
But,
yeah.
But I think in a way it's the message it sends to the child as well. If the adults within the equation become upset that we haven't won a game, what's the message that sends to a young child? That's the important. The reason I come and watch you play football is I want to see you win. It's not did you enjoy yourself and what did you do well, what was you successful at, what you might you want to get better at. One of the best things you could say, and I only heard this a couple of years ago, and I thought it was brilliant. The best thing that you could say to your child is, I love watching you play football. That takes all the winning out of the equation. That takes the performance out of the equation. I just love watching you play football. That's really powerful. And it's the same as anybody doing anything. If somebody says to you, do you know what, I love watching you do that. Nobody's ever said that to me, I must admit, but, or ever likely to. But I think that's a really powerful message to say to somebody.
I think Matt just popped in a comment there. You need the children to get over the fear of making a mistake to set them free, or have the freedom to take control. And I think that's us letting go of it and handing it over, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that it's a really good point. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, why are children fearful of making mistakes? And the reason is because of the reaction of making a mistake, more than likely. So if a child makes a mistake, I suppose in any or a majority of environments, and I'm just linking it to a football pitch, they make a mistake and then they'll look somewhere, and primarily they'll either look at us as the coach or at us as the coach or the parent, because they're looking for a reaction. And if our reaction is negative, what we say is negative, our body language is negative, that's sending a huge message to that child. And it'd be really nice to get to the situation where a child makes a mistake and then just gets on with the game, and he's not worried about the reaction, because they actually know they're in an environment where they're supported, they're supported by the people around them, so they know full well that if they make a mistake, the coach is going to have a conversation about it later. But it's not to tell me that I've made a mistake, it's to just ask me a question about, what do you think happened, and what was you trying to do, and what might you do next time, and why do you think it didn't work? So they're the supportive conversations, but it's difficult, and it takes a long time to get better at doing that. And I think the important thing for everybody to realise on the call is, no matter what level anybody else is like now, we've all been in the same situation. We've all been learning how to be better coaches and treat our players in a better way, and a more supportive way. And I'm not saying anybody in it is the finished article either, because I'm certainly not. And more likely never will be. But we can strive to be as good as we can possibly be. And if you're 1% better tomorrow than you was today, then that's great. Okay. We've spoken about play already, haven't we? So a quote from Einstein, not me. Play is the highest form of research. So going back to what I said about playing on the green outside my house when I was younger for hours and hours and hours and hours, and getting dragged in when it was dark. Didn't want to go in and have my dinner because I might not come back out, that sort of stuff. That's where the research was done. So I didn't necessarily have somebody telling me how to kick a ball. I discovered how to kick a ball. And I discovered how not to kick a ball. But with hours and hours and hours of practice, you got better at kicking a ball and dribbling with a ball, and making decisions and collaborating with other people and becoming resilient, because you just got beat by quite a few goals and you had to deal with it. But it's not a problem, because tomorrow you'll have another go. And now I'm planning on how I'm going to do better tomorrow after today. So I'm actually planning and I've reflected on what I've done. Now, I didn't as a kid think, well, I'm going to reflect on that now, and then I'm going to plan my strategy for tomorrow. But that, you know, as an adult, you know that's what you did. Now, that's what children do now. If we give them the opportunity, they'll come up with ideas on how they can do things better, thinking about what they've done well. Now, if they're 8, they're not going to give us chapter and verse on you know what they've done well and what they haven't. But if we give them the opportunity to voice their opinions, then they might surprise us in what they will come up with, to be perfectly honest. Because I think they know a lot more than we perceive that they do, if we give them a chance. Okay. I suppose that bottom bit links to what I said as well. Our children now have less opportunities of getting out and playing and doing everything that we spoke about just now that more likely a majority of us on this call had the opportunity to do, get out and play. So I think this is really important, and it links back to the point earlier. Can we recreate those types of things? You know, can we play 1v1 games? Can we play games like Wembley, things like that, in our training environment? I think it was the Spanish national side training on some footage, and most of their training was exactly what's on that slide. So it was small-sided games dealing with 1v1 situations, and obviously finishing with a shot on goal, or trying to have a shot on goal. So attackers working, defenders working, then working as a pair, working as a 3, 4, building it up. But also they worked out of balance as well. So whether it was unequal for the attackers or for the defenders, they kept mixing it up, and it just gave them loads and loads of different situations that they had to deal with. Now, obviously, if we're giving young players those sorts of opportunities, they're not going to be like the Spanish national team. However, they will have lots of opportunities to try and solve problems, try to overcome, you know, barriers that are put in their way. And the more they do it, the better they'll become at it with our support and our guidance. Because in effect, it doesn't matter what format of the game you play, whether it be 5v5, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11, the game's made up of 1v1s, 2v2s, or 2v1s, 2v3s. So at some point, after the game's kicked off, when the ball's in a certain area of the field, you're going to have small battles going on all around the field. So that's just reality. Yes, you might have tactics. Yes, you might have a strategy. Yes, you might have patterns of play as you get older, but it ultimately comes down to what am I like up against my opponent, and can my mate help me beat those two opponents?
etc. Just I think on that point, so if anyone has watched any games the last few days or perhaps this evening, even if you pause it or you just imagine it paused, and like you said there, you see those 1v1s, 1v2s, 2v1, you see them regularly, and it's relevant for all age groups and all abilities. So earlier on in the conversation, there was some questions and there were some comments, some we didn't actually get to, based around that kind of differentiation and varying needs. Okay. And I remember there was a question there about, so this type of format, 1v1s, 2v2s, is a really, really good way. It's not the way, but it's a really good way of managing that within your activities that you're doing. Yep. So if you've got, I don't know, a group of 6 or a group of 8 or 9 or whatever it is, the numbers don't really matter too much. But if you've got, a 1v1, it could be matched up in the sense of their current ability. So you could do it as a bit of a competition. You could do it so there's a bit of a ladder competition, move up, move down, first to 3, or what's the score after 1 minute, whatever it may be. But they'll get tons and tons of touches, which we said in the foundation phase is absolutely vital for their development. But they'll get all those other things that perhaps we don't even realise. So that interaction with people maybe they wouldn't normally be with. So that bit at the start of the session that we see a lot when they go, okay, get into pairs, but not you two.
Yeah.
Now the reason they say that is because maybe those two might be deemed as causing some trouble, but it's maybe just because they're best mates and they wanted to see each other all week, for example. But there's nothing wrong with them being together for that first 2 minutes because we're going to move them on. So there's not a way of doing it, but that format allows so much exploration for the players, but also for you as a coach, because you can just stand back and observe.
Yeah.
And really, you're just facilitating that, aren't you?
Yeah, no, exactly that. And also, if we wanted to make it more relevant to games, those 1v1s, 2v2s, whatever it might take place on certain areas of the pitch. If we've got a pitch to train on, or the reference points might say if we're on a 3G or something like that, and we've got a certain area of the 3G, can we make that relevant to a pitch we might play on a Sunday? So there could be different areas of the pitch. So it could be, trying to get our players to get used to defending, centrally or over by the touchline or something like that, loosely around certain themes. Depending on how we want to do it. You can pitch it however you want, can't you? But there'll be massive returns from doing those sorts of stuff, without a doubt, definitely.
When it's as it's called, isn't it? I mean, we obviously we're talking about the foundation phase. We're talking about building those foundations. So the 1v1s, the 2v1s, 2v2s, that all forms the kind of basis of those underloads and overloads that they're going to see in the game later on, or when they're older or whenever. So it's knowing how to be successful in those situations or understand those situations, which ultimately lead to further learning and understanding of the game.
Yeah, and I think that I suppose the relevant thing as well is it's taken away some of the decision making. So if they're playing 7v7, then they've got 6 people they might be able to pass to on a match day. That's a lot of decisions for a player to make, as well as trying to do something with the ball when they're in possession of the ball. Equally, if one of my teammates has got the ball and I'm one of the other 6, how do I support my teammate? Do I know what that is? So angle, distance, blah blah blah, supporting my teammate. That's a lot to think about. If we're doing 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, maximum you've got to think about is, well, there's 2 other people I might pass to, or I might take a player on myself, and there's less people that have to think about where they might support the player on the ball. So that all helps the younger age groups to play the smaller sided games, gives them loads more goes at it, like we said just now. Yes, they'll mess it up a lot of the time, but straight away they're going to have another go at it in a minute. Good. Don't know why I've done that, actually. So I suppose just think about, we've spoken a fair bit about it as well. What sort of practices can we think about designing? What sort of practices do we design already that engages our young players? It challenges our young players. It gives them ownership. I think that's massively important. They've got ownership of what they're trying to do, and it stimulates them as well. I think one of the things I'd say is, if you're putting on a practice, so you're considering everything we've just said there, but would you enjoy playing in that practice that you're putting on for your players? And if the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, as a young player, I wouldn't have enjoyed that for whatever reason, don't put it on. Simple as that. Because when we was younger, we enjoyed certain things, and that one of them wasn't standing about and not seeing the ball much. again, going back to what we said about loads of 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, 4v4s, you're going to see the ball on a regular basis. You're going to pop up in different areas of a practice area. You won't always be stuck in one position because it's going to be a very fluid practice. Make sure we design practices that promote the problem solving and the exploration, like we said before. I think it's important that we work on things that the players need, not necessarily what we want as a coach. So I think it's really important to think about needs of the players rather than wants of us. Try and flip it in that way. Again, as players get older, more likely once we're out of this phase, we'll be looking at things in a different way because the players will be more analytical, but we're not actually talking about that yet because that part of the brain isn't going to be developed yet a while. And also within the practice that they're going to be playing that we've designed, what are they going to learn? So how have we designed it so the players are going to learn certain things? And maybe how do we know if they're learning as well? I think that's important. So do we do that by observing? Do we do that by having some conversations? Do we do that by reflecting on it later on and asking questions? So think about how we know if they're going to learn within that practice, or have they learned within that practice? Have we got a mechanism where our players regularly feed back to us?
Gary, just on that point of learning,
Go on, Matt.
I think once you have that at the back of your mind or forefront of your mind when you're coaching, what does that learning actually mean, and how do you learn things? Well, for everybody it would be slightly different, but also how we put that information across or facilitate as a coach is really important. But things like I mentioned earlier, if you just use buzzwords often as a coach, what they'll do is they'll maybe just end up remembering a series of words, but for them on the pitch, ball at their feet, a dynamic environment, that's probably not going to be good enough just to remember some words that have been said, because they haven't actually been involved in the process or understood the process or have new knowledge other than just that word that the coach has told them. And also, if it's very coach heavy in terms of the coach doing demos all the time and showing them in a way that perhaps they can't achieve yet themselves, they're not going to have much of a connection with it, because actually it's quite demotivating because they can't do it yet. And they don't see themselves being able to do that yet. But involving them in that process step by step, which is not easy by any stretch of imagination, but they have to be involved in that process, don't they?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And I think that we need to consider how much we expect them to learn in a session, and I suppose again it's something that I suppose I used to fall in the trap of giving somebody 4 or 5 things that I wanted them to try and do. Well, realistically, if players within the foundation phase are going to try and achieve more than a couple of things, that's a big challenge. So maybe think about, well, what do the players want to learn? What would we like them to learn? How are we going to do it? How do we know? And how many things can we actually ask them to think about? That might be give them one thing to think about if it's in a match. Maybe we've got a challenge for the first half, and that's it. So one thing to focus on first half. Yes, you're going to play the game. However, this is going to be our primary focus, our primary challenge for us in the first half as an individual. How successful are we? And then maybe we have another challenge in the second half. Or maybe we try and do better with the first challenge in the second half. I don't know. But don't give the players too many things to think about. Otherwise they won't think about anything. So I think that's really important. we can saturate people with information if we're not careful. Bit like me rambling sometimes, saturating people.
Just
Okay.
a comment related to that, Gary, in the
Go on,
chat box. So Ben's just mentioned just to keep jargon to a minimum. So if you're going to use
great point.
You're going to use terms and jargon to explain it to players, make sure they have the understanding of what you mean. Don't assume that they know, and I think that's a really valid point, and comes back to what we said about, you know, often we hear buzzwords and you know, certain phrases that, is it actually relevant to those players, and how does it work when put into practice, when put into that game situation. So yeah, good point from Ben there.
I think it's, I mean, it may be we talk to the players and find out what their understanding's like, terminology wise. So what do they understand, what don't they understand? How would they like the information given? And that gives us an idea of how we can simplify our vocabulary, maybe, because we've all fallen into that trap, I would imagine. So maybe what would the players call certain aspects of the game? So find out what they know, find out what they don't know. So we maybe can preempt that and stop falling into that trap. So it's a really good point. Really good point. Oh, done it again, Andy. Okay, so simply, our role as a coach, explain to the players how our game's going to work, let them play, observe what's going on, see who might need help, how are we going to help them, when are we going to help them. So simple process. I've tried to simplify that as much as possible. Recognise who might need a greater challenge. So we said that about some players are going to be better than others. Some there's going to be gaps in learning, but some will need stretching. So how can we stretch the player that needs stretching? How can we stress that player out a little bit without making it too stressful? I suppose from my point of view, does it have to be us that challenge a player? Or can the player come up with a challenge themselves? Can the player come up with a way of making that even harder? And a lot of players would be able to think of something else to complicate it a little bit more and stretch them. And personally, I would prefer that than me coming up with a challenge now. And allow the players to try and work things out for themselves. It may be that we give them, clues, or we drop an idea in, but try not to give them the answer straight away or quickly. I think if a player's we'll recognise if a player's getting very frustrated and they need more help. Well, that's something to look out for. So if we do challenge a player, don't make it too difficult. So there has to be a balance. We don't want to tip them over the edge. So just simple, 5 certain things that just stuck in there to think about how we can simplify stuff. So I don't know who's been on the foundation phase information and who hasn't, and that's might not as clear as I wanted it to be or as big as I wanted it to be. So I've just put examples on there of so there's two different aspects to it. So there's the 5 to 8 group and there's the 9 to 12 group, and there's some hexagons around all the 4 corners. So there's a how and a why for each of those. So how are we going to try and do things and why are we going to try and do it? So all of those are within the psychological corner. There's a group of them that's in the technical corner, some for the physical corner, some for the social corner. So there's a how are we going to try and do things and there's a why are we going to try and do things. Can we think about, I want to try and get this from my players, or I'd like to try and challenge my players in this way, but why am I doing that? So think about how I might try and challenge the players, but then why might I try and challenge your players as well? So when you get the opportunity, go on the DNA information and have a look at them if you haven't already. They're downloadable as well. You can print them off if you want. It's entirely up to you. But also, I think it's advisable to come up with your own. So they might prompt us to come up with some other things as well. And I think they're a really good resource, a great resource, along with all the other games that are on the foundation phase information as well. Okay, so these are our general England DNA 5 core elements that we talk about on all of the courses at the moment. But within the foundation phase, it's slightly different. So what we've got in the foundation phase is we're looking at the developing child, sport and physical activity, and the game of football, and also just a little explanation about how we might bring them two together. So I think the important thing is, and I hope it's been maybe emphasised on this webinar, is the most important thing I think is the child should be the centre of everything. So it's really important that our main focus are the children within the environment. So we're there to deal. We're here to do the best for those children ultimately. And if we're not, then we're not more likely doing it for the right reasons. So it should be about the child. What's the experience? Are they enjoying themselves? Are they learning? Are they being taught more than football? So it's not just becoming a better footballer. It's about the opportunity of helping them become nice people as well. And to be perfectly honest, if we think about it, a majority of the young children we work with are not going to earn a living playing professional football. I wouldn't have thought if I was a gambling man. So they're gonna be taking part in society like the rest of us, and holding down jobs, and might be having to collaborate with other people, working as part of a team, building a resilience, knowing that some things will work okay, some things won't. They're going to more likely need to solve problems in their job roles as well. I'd imagine that we'd like them to be sort of innovative, have a good imagination, be exploratory, be sociable, be able to talk to people, be able to hold a conversation, discussion, that type of thing. We can help the players with all of those aspects. Yes, we're there as a football coach. However, our skill set is far wider reaching than that, or it can be. So, try to bring those things to it as well. So that's where it's important to involve players in the process, have a two-way process, make sure we have a social aspect to what we're doing, allow the players to have some fun, find out what makes them laugh, other interests, that sort of thing. So it's important that we don't take it too seriously, and everything is just football. So we're looking to build on, the life skills, the social skills, etc., and that's more likely more important than the football coaching that we're doing, if I'm perfectly honest. And I certainly didn't realise that initially, but I do now. Okay, I think it's really important that players experience, or children experience, loads of different sports, because there's lots of attributes that they could learn from different sports that is going to help them playing football as well. So maybe, agility, coordination, hand-eye, ball coordination, that sort of thing can be drawn from other sports. There's transferable skills as well that can be brought from other sports. And also just bringing that together. So I think it's important that are we making the most of and creating the best possible environment for us to help teach the players, and also for the players to have an environment where equally it's enjoyable for them to learn as well as we progress along this path together. And to be perfectly honest, you'll know if they enjoy it, because you'll know by the smiles on their faces, the noise they make. But as they get older, they more likely won't see that they're appreciating that until later in life, but they'll realise that they've learned a lot from you, they've enjoyed it. And I certainly always think of the scenario of or the analogy of who my favourite teachers were and who my least favourite teachers were. And I'm sure you can all think of that as well. So I'm not going to give you my answers, but why did you have favourite teachers and why did you have teachers that weren't your favourite teachers? You could put something in the chat if you wanted to, and then at the end I might share it, or I might mention who might be the closest to mine. So I'd imagine most people have seen these 9 statements now. So whether we're talking about the DNA statements within the foundation phase, whether we're thinking about them in the youth development phase or the professional phase, these don't change, but the context that's below all these will change depending on obviously the phase that we're talking about. So it's quite simple within the foundation phase. I'm just going to go through them in a minute, and then a little bit more context is added as we go through the different stages. So hopefully these are relevant to the age and stage that the players are at. So I'm not going to read through all of it. Well, actually, I can't see it. Really small. All it is, though, is making sure that our players are comfortable with the ball, helping them to master the ball. I don't think I can make it any bigger, can I?
No, we're gonna share these slides afterwards, so we'll email this round to everybody as well.
All right, mate. I'll put my bins on. So develop a mastery of the ball, and the confidence to try new things. Excite with the ball and seek creative solutions. Be exciting and positive in possession, playing with individuality and with elements. Oh, I'm going to try and read that. It's doing me in. Okay, we'll flick through them. So what I'd more likely say to people as well is try and look at what those 9 statements are in the youth development phase, or we can send that out to you, and the professional phase as well, so that we can get an idea of the difference, because there's a fair bit of difference, and there's a fair bit more complexity and context as the age phases progress. Okay, so I'd like to think that a lot of people have seen the coaching fundamentals. So if you've been on a course, you would have seen the coaching fundamentals. All we're talking about really is the types of things that we feel that would be beneficial for us to maybe include within our coaching sessions. Now, it's certainly not expected that everybody includes every one of these within every coaching session, because I don't think that's possible. But maybe you pick some that you might want to focus on in the coming week or the coming 2 weeks. And then you think about how you're going to design your practice to actually incorporate these fundamentals. So just on this one, I've just sort of highlighted. So one of my intentions if I was doing my next session, would be to use positive and enthusiastic manner with the players at all times. So I'm not going to have any negativity at all within this practice. Everything I'm focusing on is going to be positivity and supporting the players throughout. So I'm really conscious on. It could be that I've sort of thought to myself, last week my body language was really poor, and I think I reacted quite poorly to a couple of instances. So this week I'm going to try. It's not necessarily, you know, I'm giving the players something to do, but I'm actually working on myself, and this is an aim for myself. I want to have a positive. I want to have positive comments, but also positive body language throughout this session. So it could be that we're trying to help ourselves as well. Develop practices that enable the players to make lots of decisions. So we're not saying difficult decisions, but decisions that are relevant for maybe an upcoming game and maybe linked to the position that a player might be playing in. Or it could be an area that they want to get better at, or we'd like them to get better at. And also within this practice, I'm not going to stop them and talk to them for any length of time. I'm going to keep the ball rolling for as long as possible. It's fairly cold. I want them moving about anyway, and I don't want them maybe getting bored because I'm talking too much. I'm going to be positive, so I'm not going to have too much to say other than praise and other than recognising that somebody's done something really well. Okay, a little challenge for those on the call. So what we've got is the four corners, and this is just pitched in a slightly different way. So if we've seen the four corners, you may not have seen it in the way that it's mapped out here. So different terminology. So the ball and your game, your body and movement, your mind and thinking, your friends and teammates. So all I want you to think about is just for 2 minutes, can you think of something that might populate something in each of those corners that you might ask one of your players or some of your players after a game or after training? And think slightly differently to just listing down passing, running with the ball, etc., dribbling, shooting. What can you ask your players linked to those four corners that's going to put a slightly different slant on things? Your timing is, Andy.
There's a couple coming in. I think we'll see some more of it. The first one that's in from Andrew: how well did you communicate?
Love that. Excellent.
I think you might have seen these before. Wayne said,
I'm not cheating.
Wayne said, did you talk to your teammates today?
Brilliant.
And then Mark Gordon, thanks Mark. What new skills did you try today? I think if you just think about that, that any age group, it's just a great question, isn't it? Something along those lines of what new things did you try today? Or did you try something today you've not done before? Because that might be an easy enough thing for them to actually remember, because it's about them.
Yeah, I think it's just think of a prefix to a question, and then we can fill the gaps in, can't we? So think about what players might do within a game, and then we can think of a question we might come up with. So it could be the what, the how, the when, whatever you want to prefix it with. Okay.
Loads
last 10 seconds.
Loads
and then
more
we'll populate.
So
keep firing them out, Andy.
Nikki said, did you understand all or any of the instructions?
Good.
Ben said, what could you have done differently in that situation? Faye, what did you enjoy about the game? Great question.
Yeah, love that.
that involves emotion. So again, something that would probably be easy to come out rather than any kind of technical detail. Robert, so did you enjoy yourself today? Brilliant. Wayne, great one. How far do you think you've run today?
Good. I'm
not sure.
One invests on them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, loads more coming in. Really good.
Okay, so in the technical corner, what skills have you used today? How many different playing positions did you try? What areas of the pitch did you play in? Did you learn anything about playing football today? Physical, I'm not going to keep reading them out. Psychological and social. So these was all produced from a guy who does my roll up in Shropshire, Matt Jones, and I really liked it. So I think it's a really good tool to use to get us to maybe get the players to reflect in a slightly different way. So there's nothing there that relates to result, and it relates to lots of different other things. Could we have the players coming up with questions to add to those boxes as well? So could they come up with a question and answer it themselves, and maybe bring it to training next week, or WhatsApp it, depending on the age group, or get their mum to WhatsApp it or dad to WhatsApp it to us. So I think it puts a really friendly slant on things, and also it gets them to reflect on what they've done. But also, I think from my point of view, if players know they're going to do something like this, they may think about it beforehand, and they may start to think about what they've done in the game prior to doing this after the game as well. So it might help them to start to be a little bit more analytical, if you like, without actually bringing analytical into the equation. But we're getting them to think about certain aspects of the game. And also, I think having something like that helps the players to not just think about the technical side of the game. So we're actually thinking about all different aspects. We're talking about the psychological and social corners as well, which a lot of the times in the past we've neglected. So I think that's a good thing as well. Good. Excellent. Okay. Everybody would be very pleased to know that we've only got 2 slides left. If there's any burning questions at the end and anybody wants to hang on, then I'll certainly be here to answer any questions. I'm sure Andy and Lawrence would love to be here as well.
No problem.
But the last 2 slides on here, everybody, are just contact details. So where we can get some further resources around the bits and pieces we've spoken about today. And also on the next slide, we've got contact details of the relevant officers at Essex FA that you may need to